Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds, Interdependence and Decentralization, written by Adrienne Marie Brown, read by Sen Kirst-Schultz. Interdependence and Decentralization. Interdependence is mutual dependence between things. If you study biology, you'll discover that there is a great deal of interdependence between plants and animals. Inter means between. So interdependence is dependence between things, the quality or condition of being interdependent or mutually reliant on each other. Decentralization, the dispersion or distribution of functions or powers, the delegation of power. Grounding in nature. Quote, I spent an entire year on this porch in Mississippi watching a family of geese. They get to give. Over and over they get to give. Their style of getting and giving are particular to each bird, but they give every single day. They share and accept sharing with grace and so much style. I'm working on this every day of my life. End quote. Chiese Lehmann. Quote, when Canada geese are migrating, they take turns at the front of the V, turns being the leader, the weight carrier, and being the follower, the rester. End quote. Cat Aaron. When a goose is injured during migration, 2 geese will land with it and stay until it is healed or it dies, and then catch up with their flock. Flocking is fundamentally about decentralizing the effort for safety and trusting leadership to come from any edge of the flock. Quote, when Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast, almost everything lost its footing. Houses were detached from their foundations, trees and shrubbery were uprooted, signposts and vehicles floated down the rivers that became of the streets. But amidst the whipping winds and surging water, the oak tree held its ground. How? Instead of digging its roots deep and solitary into the earth, the oak tree grows its roots wide and interlocks with other oak trees in the surrounding area. And you cannot bring down 100 oak trees bound beneath the soil. How do we survive the unnatural disasters of climate change, environmental injustice, over-policing, mass imprisonment, militarization, economic inequality, corporate globalization, and displacement? We must connect in the underground, my people. In this way, we shall survive. End quote. Naima Penniman. Many trees grow from a common root system underground, are one being reaching up in many bodies. Birch, ash, mangrove, oak trees wrap their roots around each other under the earth. Mycelium, the threading that makes up most mushrooms, communicates between trees, particularly about toxic growth, a process called mycorrhizoa. Most animals, including humans, sustain parasites and bacteria along and within our bodies, some of which manage waste and keep us well. Quote, parasites can be symbiotic and help each creature thrive, stronger together rather than divided. Fish cleaning barnacles from sperm whales, cleaner, and pilot fish rule. End quote. Hannah Sassaman. This support happens between and within species. Ants tell each other where food is, not hoarding individually, but operating on a principle that the more of them that gather the food, the more food they will have as a community. Quote, in nature, everything works in collaboration. There are hummingbirds and flowers that are in such deep coordination that they need each other for survival. How vibrant and alive and successful could our movement be if we moved with such coordination and collaboration? End quote. Carissa Lewis. And the final quote, I believe in the honesty of trees. I, like many organizers, have spent a lot of time processing the notion that anything worth its outcome involves everyone's priorities, desires, visions, and perspectives in every phase and around every decision. I look at the anatomy of trees as one of nature's examples of successful organizing. that realizes that our power is in our ability to both be fiercely centered and grounded, but also infinitely reaching towards our unique sources of energy, light, and growth. Each tree's elements are reliant on one another, but totally unique in form and function. There is no competition or pressure to be the root or the trunk or the buds that bloom. Each tree is a universe, a master delegator, a puzzle, and a puzzle piece. They have encouraged me not to worry so much about making everyone, quote-unquote, feel important, and to focus on how to create systems and support efforts where everyone is important and clear on how their work is unique, crucial, and totally interconnected. End quote. Morgan Mann Willis. One of the most common and exciting elements of the visioning exercises I have done with social justice movements and organizations is the desire for a society where there is more interdependence, mutual reliance, and shared leadership and vision. This is particularly our longing in the face of economic competition. Most of us are socialized towards independence, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, working on our own to develop, to survive, to win at life. Competition is the way we hone our skill and comfort with the opposite of mutual reliance. We learn to feel proud about how much we achieve as individuals, and sometimes to actively work to bring others down in order to get ahead. In a capitalist society like the United States, every aspect of our survival, from food and water to healthcare, childcare, and elder care, is based on our success at being an individual in the world. Do we compete well enough to make good money so that we can live a good life? Competition exists all over nature. Being the alpha is a big deal. Competing in mating and survival cycles can be understood as natural. In the absence of reasoning, it appears to be a viable way to manage community power dynamics. Humans are unique because we compete when it isn't necessary. We could reason our way to more sustainable processes, but we use our intelligence to outsmart each other. We compete for fun, for ego. The idea of interdependence is that we can meet each other's needs in a variety of ways, that we can truly lean on others and they can lean on us. It means we have to decentralize our idea of where solutions and decisions happen, where ideas come from. We have to embrace our complexity. We are complex. While many of us articulate a yearning for a more simple life, we continue practicing complexity as our evolutionary path. As I have deepened into a regular meditation practice and regular retreat times, I have grown in appreciation for simplicity, while also understanding that I enjoy it as a visitation, that being in a complex life is actually intriguing and delicious to my system, and that I have to understand that it isn't just my own complexity at work, but everyone I am in relationship with, creating an abundance of connections, desires, interactions, and reactions. I have begun to wonder how it looks to practice complexity as a sacred path, as interdependence. Of course, whenever I think things like this, I turn to Grace Lee Boggs and find that she was there ahead of me. On the wall of her home is a sign, quote, "Building community is to the collective as spiritual practice is to the individual," end quote. Being a part of movements is complex work. It requires a faith. Being a part of movements is complex work. It requires a moment for faith. There are two sayings from the Quran and Islam that have taught me how to think about nature as an influence. A. If only you relied on Allah, a true reliance, He would provide sustenance for you just as He does the birds. They fly out in the morning with their stomachs empty and return in the afternoon with full stomachs. This influences my organizing by reminding me that we are not the absolute progenitors of our outcomes. We put in the work, we fly out, and we have an intention. Get food and racism, change society, get free, and we work hard. We look for the worms and we build our nests and we fly in formation, etc. But at the end of the day, we have to believe firmly that there are forces of justice and truth and love at play. We do our part and rely on the greater power of the universe, aka our collective intentions and efforts. It's relieving to know that it is not always up to us as individuals, but that there is a complex interconnection of power at play. The second saying: a Muslim is like a date palm tree whose leaves do not fall, always beneficial and never harmful. This influences my organizing by reminding me that my core responsibility is to be a benefit to whatever I am engaged in. I may not always know how that will happen, but it has to be my aim. I want people's lives to have been better, even in very tiny ways, from having participated with me in this work. This means to me that I bring beautiful words, actions, ideas, and behaviors into spaces. At the end of it all, even if we don't see the fruits of our labor, shouldn't we be able to say we loved and enjoyed each other? That's why I want to act and be like a palm tree, providing shade, covering my comrades instead of throwing shade. I want to provide food and dates. I want to be what they can lean on. I want to be a resource, sustaining our work. End quote. Aisha Shillingford. Quote, I grew up rooted in an early understanding of the continuum between us, the ancestors and the natural world. Our rituals, medicine, and spiritual guides were all rooted in nature. Oshun represented the sweet waters, Oya, the wind, and Orisha, Oko, the Orisha of agriculture and the fertility of the earth. We were taught all things were interconnected and that we were the keepers of balance. In the Yoruba tradition, we demonstrate our love for the Creator by caring for creation. I am a daughter of Oshun and Abatala. You are without a doubt a daughter of Oshun. Listen to the river by Ibei. End quote. Elizabeth Yampieri. Do you already know that your existence, who and how you are, is in and of itself a contribution to the people and place around you? Not after or because you do some particular thing, but simply the miracle of your life. And that the people around you and the places have contributions as well? Do you understand that your quality of life and your survival are tied to how authentic and generous the connections are between you and the people and place you live with and in? Are you actively practicing generosity and vulnerability in order to make the connections between you and others clear, open, available, durable? Generosity here means giving of what you have without strings or expectations attached. Vulnerability means showing your needs. Love is an emergent process. A poem. I stand before my love and let the tendrils unfurl in every direction. I am whole and becoming. Time is one instant examining itself, mirrors, seeing each other, and blushing into eternity. I am the ant who carries grandfather to the grave in my palms. You lift the next day's meal, enough for everyone we know. We love in this rhythm, leaving home and returning on the wind. Love can't look away from itself, vibrating in the cell, fluttering breathless into sustained migration. I feel you, like dust feels water and remembers the home galaxy. It appears nothing is new, never was, and nothing is truly massive when seen in its wholeness. Until I took this breath, repeating the miracle, I didn't know I would say it, could not have known. I look to the sky, taste the wind on my tongue, and fling myself into the pattern. When I forget, when I think the end is near, I realize my insignificance, as important as yours, and begin to love again. Interdependence is iterative. What I have been studying by being hyper-aware inside my life is how much being interdependent as a species is a series of small, repetitive motions. Here are some of the things I have had to do repeatedly towards interdependence. First, be seen. Initially with defensiveness, I am not like you say I am, even and especially in the face of experts. I have diagnosed myself, I know what is wrong with me. And then perhaps without agency, being seen is actually non-negotiable, though I can hide, or I can determine my level of grace and relationship to it. On so many levels, interdependence requires being seen as much as possible as your true self, meaning that your capacity and need are transparent. Meaning, even when I don't want to look in the mirror, I am, and I choose to be, open to the attention of others. Sometimes I start with my woes, those with whom I am co-evolving through friendship. I show something I've been hiding, and hope that I'm still lovable. This generally goes better than could be expected, every single time. I have also tried starting out naked on a hard operating table under a bright light, shivering from the cold of so many strangers' eyes. I can walk towards this quote-unquote being seen and experience the beauty of releasing all that guard and protection, that miracle distortion. Or I can resist it and only be seen in moments of trauma and loss of control. But I will be seen, and the more I open to it, the gentler and the more necessary that attention feels. Second, be wrong. There is nothing like the wrong feeling of being an intuitive witchy healer and having to be told something indisputable about your body. Particularly if you've already done the thorough work of disputing said something, out loud, and at a volume that might, by some, be described as unmedicated anguish level. It's pitiful wrong. The easier, quote-unquote, being wrong is for you. The faster you can release your viewpoint, the quicker you can adapt to changing circumstances. Adapting allows you to know and name current needs and capacity, to be in relationship in real time, as opposed to any cycle of wishing and or resenting what others do or don't give you. Sometimes there isn't one definitive truth, my favorite situations. And sometimes there is one and you can't see it. Least favorite. Least. Just at least consider that the place where you are wrong might be the most fertile ground for connecting with and receiving others. And in a beautiful twist, being soft in your rightness as opposed to smashing people with your brilliance can open others up to whatever wisdom you've accumulated. I am grateful to all the people who were softly right about me this past month when I couldn't see my own needs. Third, accept my inner multitudes. An honest self would agree to some self-care practice or limitation that would protect my recovering wounded body. And then another, honest, even earnest self would almost immediately act against that agreement. I'd be half bent over to lift something when the voice of one of my precious beloveds would slip through. Seriously, what the fuck are you doing? My loved ones are pure molasses sweetness. There is a me that wants to get that sugar devil away from me for good. There's a me that can't go through physical trauma without ice cream, can't even imagine that. The more I accept this, the more I can share my contradictory truths with those who can support me and help me move towards my best self. I am not turning against myself, I am multitudes. The tide to be turned is a process of inner alignment. Those who wish to support me need me to be vulnerable with that inner contradiction. Fourth, ask for and receive what I need. Can you drive me to the hospital? Can you explain what is happening to me? Can you stop my pain? Can you open this water bottle? Can you help me stand up and sit down? Can you open the door? Can you put my bag in the overhead bin? Can you bring me the groceries? Can you drive me to the airport and actually park and help me bring my suitcase inside? Can you hold me while I cry? Can you heal me? And so on for what feels like forever. And most of all, the childlike request inside of storytelling. Can you listen while I feel this? Again? Again? I'm learning that interdependence is not about the equality of offers in real time. I had to ask most of these things of people I didn't necessarily know, or who I knew but wouldn't be able to offer anything to in the foreseeable future. I had to trust in that karma-ish idea that the support I have offered in the past, or will offer in the future, would balance this scale, which felt so me-tilted. Over and over and over, I offered up my small self and was held in big ways. Thread through me, again, again. The result of this experience is that I feel so much more woven into the world. I still anticipate my independence, my default can-do self-space, but I don't want to sever any of this connecting fabric between myself and all of the incredible people who have held me through this past month, who saw me, corrected me, held me in my contradictions, met my needs. I want more of my life to feel this interdependent, this of community and humanity. I love knowing how incredible it feels to have a need met, to be loved and cared for, and also know how incredible it feels to meet an authentic need. It's data, all this learning. Tender data. Quote, patience. The slow, painful patience. The one that reminds you to be humble and nimble. The one that reminds you how much existence relies on our ability to remember our connection to Earth. We are nature, not separate or disconnected. End quote. Patrice Coulors. Quote, the biggest thing that I have learned from nature is the importance of relationships. E.g., an ecosystem isn't just a list of living things, squirrel, tree, bee, flower. It's the set of relationships between those living things. The squirrel lives in the tree, the bee pollinates the flower. In terms of organizing, this means that a given social movement isn't a list of organizations or campaigns or even individuals. It's the set of relationships between organizations, campaigns, and individuals, etc. Credit where credit is due to the folks at Movement Generation for being the ones who drew my attention to all of this. End quote. Farhad Ibrahimi. Quote, how do I think creating collective access epitomizes emergence? Innovation, experimentation, relationships. That you couldn't have planned this shit, but it happened because of lots of disability justice work, getting the ground ready for this bloom. You couldn't have done any of this from a top-down, flowchart, strategic planning meeting in a boardroom. It happened because 3 disabled, queer people of color trusted our own brilliant knowledge of what we and our communities needed, our own resources. We already had to do it, and reached out with love to each other. End quote. Leah Lakshmi Piepsna Samarashna. Confessions of a Charismatic Leader in Recovery. Quote, there is also the danger in our culture that because a person is called upon to give public statements and is acclaimed by the establishment, such a person gets to the point of believing that he is the movement. End quote. Ella Baker. Quote, we are all connected, like our bodies. If one single molecule is off, then our entire bodies are affected. In nature, if one thing is off balance, then we are all off balance. Organizing from this perspective allows us to see that it is not enough for any one of us to be okay if others are in dis-ease. End quote. Rusia Mohiuddin. Quote, nothing happens in isolation. There is always a squad, collaborators, a body that supports change occurring. End quote. Sage Crump. So, in an interdependent movement, With decentralized innovation and leadership, how do we respond to the gift and the curse of the charismatic leader? In my political education, I learned how the civil rights movement had been negatively impacted by the same charismatic leaders who so inspired me. When leaders became visible, whether beloved or controversial or both, they became endangered politically and physically, which led to assassinations, tragic losses that left vulnerable movements. There was an apparent leadership vacuum that slowed momentum for years. I say apparent because there were tons of leaders who survived that time, but they didn't play as well to the media or didn't want to. Many of them didn't fit the mainstream idea of what leadership looked like: male, straight, loud, individualistic, articulate, handsome, charming, etc. I have heard the stories from elders, stories about how the non-movement public perceived an absence of leadership, how that perception shook the movement's self-perception. Of course, movement analysis of what happened within movement space is more nuanced. Patriarchy, educational privilege, colorism, and other factors played into the tensions that weakened movement during that time. And, in the spirit of nonlinear and iterative change, I would say that the civil rights movement did exactly what it could do based on what was known and possible at the time. Many of us have experienced the trials and tribulations of the charismatic leader in movement today. Or, the flip side, trying to lead an effort and generate resources for work when you don't quite fit the bill of a charismatic leader, or when you have a big personality but just don't feel comfortable in that position, like me. Being anointed as a movement rock star at any scale can be confusing, trust me. On one hand, it's like, yay, baby, I'm a star. This can be healing, especially for those of us who experience being invisible to the world. I went from being a nerdy fat girl in glasses to a fabulous, brilliant, badass nerdy fat girl in glasses because I gave one really fantastic speech to a room full of people with influences and resources in the movement. Now, maybe it was a truly fantastic speech. Maybe it was just that I tapped into my life force, my magic, for the first time publicly. At least it was the first time I can remember feeling the sparkle at the base of my skull that tells me the room is opening, that anything can happen. I thought I alone made that magic feeling. I've learned a lot since then. I learned because there's always the other hand. Rock stars get isolated, lose touch with our vulnerability, are expected to pull off superhero work, and generally burn out within a decade. No one has time for rock star tears. I have talked with other leaders who got bumped into rock star status as young organizers, and almost all of us share a few core experiences. People stopped seeing us. We became a place to project longings and critiques. We lost touch with the fact that it's okay to make mistakes. Then we made the biggest mistakes of our lives, and we learned the hard way that rock star status is a cyclical thing. It becomes its own work maintaining and promoting the rock star in the organization. The work of promoting and protecting one personality is as different from the work of organizing as holding one's breath in is from an exhale. And then the transitions are a mess. Many of us have seen or lived through the emperor has no squad moment, when a great organization was ready for the first leadership transition, and it became clear that all the greatness was largely perceived to come from the founder. Lifting people up based on personality replicates the dynamics of power and hierarchy that movements claim to be dismantling. So, I have some charisma, I know. I am trying to only use it for good, while also building up my practices of authenticity that can balance the instinct to quote-unquote glamour people. The first step is awareness. When a charismatic leader finds the right place for their work, we can be quite useful. I have seen leaders move into politics, media, and art using their skills in those areas to raise the profile of movement work. In my own work as a facilitator and a writer, I have intentionally put myself in positions where no organization's income depends on the whims of my personality. We work well when we have people we are accountable to, people with whom we can be in interdependent relationships. Otherwise, we are monsters. We can make missions drift, can get embroiled in inter-organizational or inter-movement beef that does not serve the people, can get into a victim mentality and direct a lot of movement energy towards defending our egos, or get convinced of our superiority. Mostly, we can get too isolated for accountability. If you are in a leadership position, make sure you have a circle of people who can tell you the truth, and to whom you can speak the truth. Bring others into shared leadership with you, and or collaborate with other formations so you don't get too enamored of your singular vision. The Social Transformation Project has been doing a variety of experiments in creating safe spaces for leaders to be vulnerable and speak honestly of their accomplishments, their failures, their longings, and where they want and need collaboration. Generative somatics is also cultivating authentic presence and relationships amongst movement leaders. Bold does this for Black leaders. Having these spaces and others is helping movements develop a new definition of a great leader. Not just one who is inspirational in speech or grand actions, but one who is inspirational in collaborative action, accountability, and vulnerability. One more thing to add. Whether a leader is great or not, funders have traditionally preferred the narrative of a rock star leader and have invested in individuals more than in missions. The people of an organization make or break the work, and the best mission will not be realized without the right people behind it. The shiny stars are rarely the ones actually getting the work done, or even doing the most exciting thinking in the organization. If you are in the funding world and your primary relationship with those you fund is with the executive director, if you have not had a meaningful conversation with other staff members or community members, you may be stricken with charismitis, relational laziness induced by charismatic brilliance. It's okay. It happens to everyone, but you can unlearn this behavior. Edge funders, resource generation, and building equity and alignment are 3 formations working to shift this and other donor-funder malpractice. Finally, if you love a charismatic leader and are trying to increase accountability with them, be willing to stand next to them in honest relationships and be willing to name the power dynamics, repeatedly if need be. Part of how I became aware of myself was through co-directorship with Sharon Lungo and Megan Swoboda at the Ruckus Society. We worked together until they no longer needed my charisma. They had their own magic and systems and strength. Here is some wisdom from them directly. Quote, "Our survival depends on the relationships that we build. Some relationships are utilitarian, and sometimes that's okay. If I can be useful to others, I should be. I am not important, but what I do and don't do matters. My actions and inactions affect everyone and everything around me. We all play our role. None is more important than the others, but we all affect each other. Some roles and strategies seem insignificant or ineffective, but altogether, all our different tactics and strategies and roles can get us what we need to survive and thrive. But it is not a sure thing. We must fight for it." End quote. Megan Swoboda. Quote, "Water has been my greatest teacher, partially because I am a woman and it is a strong medicine that I carry, but also because of its sheer power. It has taught me to reflect on my own participation in work, taught me to remember the fundamentals that life is built on, that things cycle, that nothing is ever truly finished. So we have to stay vigilant and aware of how things move, even when we think we win. And lastly, water has taught me that with enough force and will, I am unstoppable." End quote. Sharon Lungo. This has been Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. Interdependence and Decentralization. Written by Adrienne Marie Brown, read by Sen Kirst-Schultz.